And though horror is perhaps the most consistently, reliably lucrative of all film genres, it's not immune to the fact that Hollywood is a cruel business where projects are greenlit and then cancelled on a whim. Every day, countless films are announced that never see the light of day, typically getting mired in development hell for reasons either artistic or business related, more likely than not the latter. And horror is no exception. We've heard countless intriguing, exciting, and simply bizarre horror projects be announced in recent years, yet if their current status is any indication at all, this lot is almost certainly never getting made. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 announced horror movies that will never be released. Number 10, World War Z 2. Despite its well-noted production woes, World War Z was ultimately broadly well received by critics and a commercial success, enough that within days of the zombie actioner's release, Paramount confirmed that a sequel was in development. J.A. Bayona was subsequently hired to direct a script from Stephen Knight. Though, when this iteration of the project fell through, the studio eventually landed on the great David Fincher to helm. Filming was set to begin in 2018, but pre-production stalled until World War Z 2 was formally cancelled in early 2019, reportedly in large part due to the Chinese government's ban on zombies, a market which was at the time extremely lucrative for Hollywood blockbusters. It truly seemed like the ship had sailed then, but back in August, David Ellison, head of the newly merged Paramount Skydance Corporation, stated that a World War Z sequel was once again a priority for the company. Even with star Brad Pitt's F1 recently blowing up at the box office and confirming him to still be a commercial juggernaut, we're closing in on 15 years since the release of the original zombie movie. That is to say, is anybody really looking for a World War Z property in 2025? Considering Paramount is hard at work developing a bevy of new IP reinforcing sequels in franchises like Star Trek and Top Gun, it wouldn't surprise anyone if World War Z 2 just gets quietly lost in the shuffle. Number 9. The Devil in the White City. The Devil in the White City is an adaptation of the novel of the same name, which chronicles the exploits of H.H. Holmes, who is often referred to as America's first serial killer. Tom Cruise initially acquired the rights in 2004, a year after the book's release, but when they lapsed, they were scooped up by Leonardo DiCaprio in 2010. DiCaprio was initially set to star in an adaptation to be directed by Martin Scorsese, though after almost a decade of development, it appears that the project had been quietly shelved. By 2019, Hulu announced that they were instead making a TV series based on the book, with DiCaprio and Scorsese tapped to produce, and Keanu Reeves in negotiations to star. However, a few months before shooting was set to begin, Reeves exited the production for unknown reasons, and Hulu ultimately decided not to move forward with the show. In a surprising move, however, in January it was announced that the original DiCaprio-Scorsese movie had been revived. Yet, as appealing as another horror movie from the duo, following 2010's Shutter Island, is, it's also tough to believe this is ever going to happen. For one, Scorsese has a ton of projects on his plate, and secondly, the man turns 83 years old this November, so there's only so much time left to make movies, and can we say with much certainty that this one will be a priority? Number 8. Gremlins 3. Gremlins 2, the new batch, was released way back in 1990, and though it's much loved by the fan base, and me, it was a colossal box office bomb, seemingly ensuring that a third film would never come to pass. And yet, Gremlins has remained a hugely popular IP in the decades since, enough that since 2013, Warner Bros. Began developing various iterations of a third Gremlins. Though initially mounted as a reboot, it was later reconceived as a direct sequel to Gremlins 2, when the first film's writer, Chris Columbus, set to pen the script. Columbus also promised that the film would use practical animatronics rather than CGI. Word went quiet on the sequel by the 2020s, though in 2025, Warner Bros. Reiterated that Gremlins 3 was still in development, with Columbus expected to direct. Plus, back in July, original star Zach Galligan claimed that the script had actually been completed. Columbus seems a little less optimistic about the sequel happening, at least anytime soon. In a recent interview, he said that nothing has been approved and referred to Gremlins 3 as a never-ending writing assignment. This feels like one of those development hell sequels that just never happens because the creatives and the studio can't quite get on the same page. And honestly, given the likelihood that a modern Gremlins will only exist with CGI creatures, regardless of what Columbus said years ago, this might be for the best. Number 7. at the Mountains of Madness. Guillermo del Toro has more unrealized projects than he has actually completed films, and right at the top of the pile is an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's legendary cosmic horror novella At the Mountains of Madness. The filmmaker was initially announced to be adapting the story in 2010 with James Cameron set to produce, yet within a matter of months Del Toro expressed pessimism about it ever happening due to Universal's anxiety about bankrolling a, in Del Toro's words, period-set R-rated tentpole movie with a tough ending and no love story. Del Toro also cited 2012's Prometheus as stalling production due to its aesthetic and narrative similarities, and though word subsequently went mum on the film for close to a decade, in late 2022 he stated the possibility of resurrecting it as a stop-motion project in the vein of his recent Pinocchio film. But At the Mountains of Madness is a tough sell for basically any studio considering its niche appeal, and if Del Toro can't get it going with an outfit as permissive as Netflix, who funded both his Pinocchio and New Frankenstein adaptation, there's sadly not much hope for it at all. Number 6. Werewolves. Shortly after the release of horror mockumentary What We Do in the Shadows in 2014, co-directors and stars Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement confirmed that a sequel was in development, a follow-up centered around the werewolf pack featured in the first film. Better yet, it would be hilariously titled Werewolves, the only thing we needed to know to be assured this movie was a good idea. But it gained little traction in the years that followed, and by 2019, Waititi half-jokingly called it the film that Jermaine and I keep pretending that we're making. In 2022, he confirmed that it hadn't been written yet, though reiterated both he and Clement still wanted to make it. Though the recent conclusion of the TV series based on the original movie makes this the perfect time to get another movie going, considering how busy Waititi in particular is these days, and how much time has passed since the first film, this feels destined to be one of those endlessly, agonizingly unrealized projects. Number 5. Blade. At 2019's San Diego Comic-Con, Marvel Studios announced that a new Blade movie set within the Marvel Cinematic Universe was in development, with Mahershala Ali set to play the Daywalker. Fans were ecstatic. But 6 years later, we seem barely any closer to actually seeing the movie. In the years that followed, the project passed through the hands of numerous directors, such as Bassam Tariq of Mogul Mowgli and Yann Dimanche of 71, as well as a bevy of writers, while the likes of Delroy Lindo, Aaron Pierre, and Mia Goth were linked to key roles. But development has continually stalled, with reports suggesting that the creatives are struggling to get a satisfactory script in place, a fact that's left star Ali frustrated. After years of delays, Blade was finally removed from Marvel's release schedule entirely last year, leading some to believe that it had been surreptitiously shelved. And while Marvel honcho Kevin Feige insists that this isn't the case, it's also tough to believe at this stage that the MCU Blade is ever actually going to happen. Number 4. The Collected. The Collected, the third entry into a cult horror franchise which began with The Collector and The Collection, actually managed to start shooting in September 2019, but after just 8 days of filming, production was unexpectedly shut down. Though shooting was expected to start back up again several times, it never happened, with filmmaker Marcus Dunstan revealing that the producers had effectively ghosted him since filming was shut down. And worse still, because he doesn't own the rights to the IP, he couldn't resume production with another team. In July of 2024, Dunstan finally provided an update claiming that the production hurdles have now been overcome and The Collected could now be made. However, Dunstan did also imply that this would be a new version of the sequel, rather than simply picking back up and continuing from the 2019 shoot. But considering that the previous film was released way back in 2012 and underperformed at the box office no less, it's fair to say that the odds of this sequel ever actually coming out are incredibly slim. Number 3. The Lost Boys reboot. The Lost Boys is one of the most beloved horror movies of the 1980s, or well, ever in my opinion, and so it was just a matter of time before Hollywood tried to make fetch happen with it again. And indeed, in September 2021, Warner Brothers announced that they were developing a reimagining of the IP, and more to the point, they already had names attached to it. Rising actors Noah Jupe and Jaden Martell were announced to star, while Jonathan Entwistle was signed to direct what's been described as a modern take on the original vampire story. Yet we've heard virtually nothing about this reboot in the 4 years since it was first announced, and honestly, it might well be for the best. This is a tough franchise to resurrect, considering how decidedly of its era the original is, in a good way, and how difficult it will be to replicate its style and charm. Some things are better off left alone, and that's definitely true of The Lost Boys. Number 2, Constantine 2. Though it proved rather divisive upon the original release in 2005, the fandom for the Keanu Reeves starring Constantine adaptation has only grown over the years, and just about everyone involved has talked up their willingness to return for a sequel. Warner Bros. Officially announced Constantine 2 in September 2022, with Reeves and original director Francis Lawrence both set to return. By September 2024, the script was said to be complete, though by the start of 2025, Reeves revealed that the story was actually still being hashed out and a final script hadn't yet been written. This past May, reports emerged that Reeves wasn't happy with the current state of the script, and considering it's now been more than 20 years since the first film came out, it might just be a case of too much time having passed. If this one actually happens, it's going to be a genuine surprise. Number 1, The Unknown. And finally, who among us can forget the infamous Willy's Chocolate Experience, a live entertainment event based on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory which took place in Glasgow in early 2024. How was that a year and a half ago? The event made global headlines for its atrocious production values, with many comparing it to the Fyre Festival. One of its more meme-worthy elements was the Unknown, an antagonist who was referred to as an evil chocolate maker who lives in the walls, yet was nothing more than a 16-year-old actress wearing a silver mask and black cloak who hides behind a mirror. Hey, listen, I had a job when I was a teenager as well. Because the internet's sense of irony knows no bounds, the Unknown quickly developed a fan art following, and soon enough, Scottish production company Caledonia Pictures announced that a horror film featuring the character was in the works. Caledonia initially stated that the film was intended to release by the end of 2024, but almost a year later, we've heard absolutely nothing. Considering that Caledonia is a company with a whopping 25 Twitter followers and no prior movies to their name, it sounds like a failed attempt to cash in on a trend. And given that the world has long since moved on from Willy's Chocolate Experience and everything involved in it, there's just no way this one is still happening.